All right, so I'm going to show you a few more tips and tricks that you can use to make your pictures look a little more realistic. So I have a couple different bears added here onto this image. You'll notice they all show up in their own layer here. I have this one bear over here, all right, is my first layer, and I have another bear here that, again, I can double click, and maybe I will call him bear with an open mouth, so I know which one is which. Now, these layers, when I have layers on top of each other like this, I can, again, click on my move tool and move one layer on top of another. All right, it will move based on whichever layer I have selected. If I want to move this bear in the back, I click on this layer and then the move tool, and now it moves him, not the one in front. Now, whichever one you see in front of the other one has to do with the order the layers are here. So right now, my bear here is in the background because it is below the open mouth bear. If I want him in front of this one, all I have to do is click on that layer, hold down the mouse, and drag him above it, and now instantly he is above that layer, like that. And once he's above, he is now in front of that other bear. And again, when I move him around, he's going to look like he's in front of him, like so. So one thing I can use to make my photos look a little more realistic is kind of rearrange my images or my layers to make one of the things show up in front or behind. And you can only do that with things that you have layers of. So for example, the background right now is all of this in the background is all part of one picture. All right, I can double click on this background and I can make it a layer. So I can make it a layer, call it a campsite, and click OK. And it's now a layer. I can move it and rearrange it. The problem is, if I do that, since this campsite is one huge picture that takes up my whole screen, it puts this other bear behind it, and so I can't see that bear anymore. All right, we'll talk more about that in a second. So you'll notice these two bears look a little different. This bear looks a little more realistic. This one, the coloring is a little different. This bear's picture was probably taken at like sunset, so this bear has got, you know, kind of an orangish tint to him. So I can adjust these a couple different ways. So if I click on the layer of the bear that I want to adjust, I have my open mouth bear here. Up here under the image option, I have an option here called adjustments. And there's all kinds of different things that I can adjust with my image. One of them is brightness and contrast. This controls how bright or how dark that image is. You can make it darker or brighter, which may or may not do what I wanted to do here. Contrast is just how much detail that image has. You can kind of dull it, or you can make it have a lot of different contrast and really make the different colors stand out. Sometimes that will work. But in this case, my problem isn't so much with the brightness, it's the color, the tint kind of my bear here. So I'm going to go to image adjustments, and there's an option in here called hue and saturation. That's the one I want. And what it does is it gives me some little sliders here that I can adjust. This top one is a hue slider. This is the color of my bear. And depending on how I drag one direction or the other, it will tint that bear or anything on this layer. Since right now this layer is just this bear, it tints the whole bear. It tints it and it will adjust it whatever it is that I want. So I could literally change its color to different things if I want to. All right, but in most cases, I'm going to want to just maybe slightly adjust it one direction or another to make it quite, you know, not quite as tinted. The other option I have here is called saturation. Saturation is the amount of color in my image. If I drag it to the right, it makes them have more color. If I drag this to the left, it makes them have less color. In this case, by taking some of that color away, it makes them look a little more realistic. All right, if I took it all the way away, it would actually take out all the color and make them black and white. But in this case, since my background picture is not black and white, I don't want that. So I can adjust that again until I get something that looks a little more realistic with the rest of my picture in here. I also have an option here for lightness. This allows me to lighten up this image or darken this image. If I was trying to take a picture and make it look like it happened at night or something like that, I could use that to adjust it. So I can adjust these to, again, try to make my photo look a little more realistic, which I think helps here. I can hit cancel if I don't like it, or I just click OK, and now it's applied those changes. All right. If I change my mind later, I can go to edit and just do an undo or what they call a step backwards, and it'll remove that setting. But in this case, I think that looks pretty good. The other thing I kind of have going on here, and to make it a little easier to see, every one of my layers has a little eyeball in front of it. That eyeball is a hide button. If I click on my campsite here, it'll actually hide my campsite image. It's still there, I can turn it back on, but if I hide it, I can kind of see the edges of my bears a little bit easier. This bear's got a little bit of extra space in between his legs here that I don't want. So what I can do is I have another tool over here called my eraser tool. And when I click on that, I can actually erase parts of my image. Now, right now, this eraser is really tiny. If you look at the size of my cursor here, it's a really tiny little circle. If I click up here where it says 14, or mine says 14, yours might say something different. This first box here, if I click on that, this allows me to change the size of that selection. So I can make this a much bigger circle if I need to. So I can adjust that depending on what it is that I'm trying to erase, so I can get really detailed with it. And then you can also adjust the hardness. The hardness is how sharp the edge is. If I do something that is very hard, it's going to be a very sharp edge to it. So it won't be very blended or won't be very smooth. If I turn that hardness down, then it's going to have kind of like a smooth edge to it. So normally you don't want things to be extremely hard. You want it to be blurred or softened just a little bit. So now I have a good size I want here. I can actually just click and hold down the mouse and move through my image, and it will erase parts that I don't want. So if I accidentally copy and pasted something over here I don't want, I can erase those things off. I also have a tool in my toolbar here, this little magnifying glass. If I click on this, I can zoom in to my canvas, or if I hold down the Option key on the keyboard and click, it'll zoom back out. So I can zoom in and then again switch back to my eraser tool and kind of get rid of some of that I didn't want in there, like so. I could also use my other selection tools. I could use maybe a quick selection tool and try to select the part that I didn't want, like so, and then hit the delete key to delete that part of the selection. Again, there's no one way to do things. You can kind of adjust it to make it the way you want. So I could maybe go back to my eraser tool here and delete some of this. Looks like part of a rock maybe around here, or maybe even all of this if I don't want, and just kind of clean things up like that. So now when I turn my background back on, which again I can hit this campsite button to turn it back on, it's going to look a little more realistic. Now to zoom all the way back out, if I want to, again I got my zoom tool here. If I want, there's an option up here at the top with that zoom tool selected that just says fit screen. If I hit fit screen, it'll resize my image so that it fits whatever size my window is here on my computer screen. So this is my modified image, and again I can adjust it and move it around however I want, like so. Now another thing I can do, and this steps things up another notch, is if I wanted to put this bear over here, you'll notice it doesn't look very realistic because there's this post right here. If I switch to my eraser tool and I clicked on my picture with the campsite and I erase that post, that's not going to work because it's going to disappear from the background. All right, there's nothing behind it to come through it, so that's not going to work. So let me undo that. So one thing I can do is I can select this post. So let me first of all put my bear exactly where I want him to be. So maybe I want, oops, wrong layer here, click on my open mouth bear, and I want him to be maybe right there. Except I want him to be behind that post. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn him off like that. And now I'm going to go and click on my campsite layer, and I'm going to go to my quick selection tool, and I'm going to select just this post. So I'm going to select it and try to get just that post and nothing else. Now again, I have a little bit over here that I don't want, so if I hit the minus sign, I can kind of straighten that collection up, just kind of get rid of the parts I don't want, like so. All right, so I have just that post selected and nothing else. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that bear back on. All right, you'll notice that that layer still shows up All right, my selection still shows up here, even though this bear is right in front of it. So what I can do is if I click on my open mouth bear layer and hit the delete key, it's going to delete this selection. But instead of deleting it from my campsite, it's going to delete it from the bear. So watch what happens when I do that. So I've clicked on my bear that's in front of this layer. I have it still selected. I'm just going to hit the delete key on the keyboard. All right, it now deletes that part of the bear. If I turn off the background, you can see my bear has had part of him deleted. But because it's deleted, it now makes it look like that this bear is behind this post, because the rest of his body is behind it, not in front of it like that. Now you'll notice it's still selected here. Again, another shortcut you can use, if I go to select, there's an option called deselect, or Command D for deselect is the shortcut. So if I hit Command D, it deselects it, and again, now it makes it look like this bear is behind my post like that. Now if I decide to move my bear, it's going to mess everything up, because hey, my bear has already been cut out, so that's not really going to work. So I need to make sure that I put the bear in the position I want before I cut it out and delete it from his image. But that's a really cool way to kind of make it look like that this bear is in one spot or another. I could do the same thing with this other bear here. Maybe I wanted him to be behind this tent, all right, instead of like that. So again, what I can do is I hide him. I'm going to go to my campsite. I'm going to select the tent this time. So I'm going to use my quick selection tool and just very quickly, again, you'll probably take more time with this, but I'm going to select the tent just like so. Now that I have the tent selected, I'm going to turn that bear back on. I'm going to click on that layer with that bear on it, and now hit the delete key, and it's going to delete that part of the bear, all right, which now makes it look like he's standing behind my tent. So again, to deselect, I can hit Command D, takes that selection away. Again, just to show you, that's what my image looks like now. I've now cut this part of him off, but it now makes it look like he is standing behind that tent instead of in front of it. Again, if I change my mind, I can go to Edit, step backwards. I can do this as many times as I want to get back to the way I had it before if I don't like that. Or if I want to go back, I can step forward, and that'll bring it back to the way I had it. So that is another way to use selection tools to make your images look a little more realistic.